Good day and welcome to Bidvest McCarthy Volkswagen Paro. My name is FC Nieuwoud and I'm here to talk to you today about something that might seem a little daunting at first when you are purchasing your new car, and that is the finance options. I know there's a lot of things that we can say about finance, but I know you have a lot of questions that you might need answering, and today we are going to answer those questions. Okay, so we get this question quite a lot, and there's quite a few things that gets factored in when the banks determine what your monthly installment will be. So the first thing would obviously be the price of the exact vehicle that you're going to purchase. Exactly what are the extras on the vehicle? What is the final price on the vehicle? Are you going to give a deposit? Then the bank goes and checks your credibility, your expenses and all of that, and they determine a certain level of affordability for you and they assign an interest rate to you. All of that gets combined to then determine a monthly installment. So it literally will differentiate from person to person based on your personal profile, the car you're buying, the term over how many months or years you're going to take the vehicle, and ultimately what interest rate you qualify for. That is an important question, but it's not so much a question of how much you have to earn. It's more about how much have you got left at the end of the day after you've met all your financial obligations. For example, I've had clients where the girl was just finished with school, she just started a job, she was earning 6,000 Rand a month, but she was staying with her parents, she had no expenses, no accounts whatsoever, and she qualified for an installment of about 3,000 Rand on and up. And she made it. Whereas I had another customer that was earning 40,000 Rand, but his total monthly expenses, the stuff that he had to pay each and every month, it came out to about 38,000 Rand, which left 2,000 Rand in his account. And the bank says, you know what, that's not enough for an installment. And ultimately he was not approved. So yeah, not so much about how much you earn, it's how much you have left after you have paid all your financial obligations. Okay, so a balloon value, or it's also called a residual value, they're both the same thing, a balloon value, or it's also called an RV. They basically come down to the same thing. So what the bank says is if you borrow money from us to purchase a car, you're only going to pay back a certain portion of that to decrease your monthly installments. So let's say, for example, you buy a car that's 100,000 Rand and you are taking it over 72 months. Over the 72 months, you will then only pay 70,000 Rand if you take a 30% RV. Now, it doesn't mean that you only pay them back that small amount. You still have to pay that 30,000 at the end of the term. But over your 72 months, you pay back the bank the 70,000 that you borrowed from the 100,000 plus the interest on the full 100,000. And then at the end of your term, at the end of your 72 months, you have to pay back this 30% or this 30,000 Rand from the full amount. Now, when you get to the end of your contract, there's one of three ways to pay back the balloon value. And the first one is you either give the cash to the bank and you keep your car. The second one is you trade in the car, which then obviously what's left of the price of the car, if you trade it in, you can use as a deposit on the next deal. And then we settle the car through that way. Or the third one is you keep your car and you refinance that 30% over another 2 years at a new interest rate, and through that you then pay the bank back in full for the full amount that you've borrowed from them to pay for the car. Okay, so interest rate dependent, we've spoken about this a little bit in one of the previous questions. It determines what your final installment will be. And because it differs from person to person, we can't make an ad that gives the interest rate for everybody. So normally our ads will say terms and conditions apply at a certain installment, and that would normally be worked out at around about 10.5 or 11.5% interest. But it does not necessarily mean that that is what you are going to qualify for. You will qualify based on your credit scoring and your credit profile. So basically, when we say interest rate dependent. If the installment would have been, let's say, 3,000 Rand on an interest of 10.5%, if your interest rate that you personally qualify for is 13%, then obviously your installment will go up accordingly, because obviously you've got to pay back more interest. So that is what we mean by interest rate dependent. It's based on the interest rate that you personally qualify for. Okay, so deposits, I get this question a lot as well. Deposits, you don't necessarily always have to give a deposit. You will see sometimes the dealers advertise a finance offer where they say a 10% deposit or something to get to a lower installment. But most of the time you don't have to give a deposit unless the bank says your affordability is out of line, that you have to give a deposit to get your affordability into line with what you can afford to pay. So a rule of thumb, if you qualify without the bank requiring a deposit, but you do want to get your installment down, the rule of thumb is for every 10,000 you put in, your installment comes down by about 150 to 200 Rand for every 10,000 that you put in. But you don't always have to give a deposit. Unfortunately not. With the economic situation in South Africa at the moment, a lot of people are falling into the trap of bad debt. And that is unfortunately one of the first things the banks look at. If you have been blacklisted, it means you're a very high risk of falling into that hole again if it is very short time in between since you've been blacklisted to the time that you are now trying to apply for a new vehicle. So the bank says you're too high of a risk, they lose risk, or they stand a risk to lose money should they then lend you the money to buy the car. So unfortunately, around about 100% of the time, if you are currently blacklisted and haven't cleared your name, then you will not qualify for finance on a new car. Sweet and short, yes, you must have a driver's license to apply for finance. It's one of the bank requirements. You do not qualify if you only have a learner's license. It must be a fully valid South African driver's license. If you have a temporary driver's license because your license card got stolen or it got lost, or if you just got your license and you're still waiting for the card, we can use your temporary driver's license as long as you also supply us with the receipt for the license card that you've ordered and paid for. That is a difficult question. It really depends on whose name you want alongside your name on the finance. You can ask a friend or family member to take out the finance on your behalf, but then the car will be registered in their name. The only time they will allow you to co-finance with someone is if that person is your spouse and you're married in community of property. But if it's your brother or your sister or your mother or your father or your best friend, they can't co-sign for you on the car because nothing stops them from just walking away. There's no contractual obligation that links them to you, as in the sense of a couple married in community of property. Trade-ins are always welcome when we do finance. It's not a big problem. It's like any other deal. Usually what happens is if you bring us a trade-in and there's no finance left on the trading, then you can use the money in a couple of ways. You can either ask for the full amount of that car to be paid back to you when you've traded in, or you can then push it towards the deal as a deposit. On the finance side, if there is still finance on the trade-in, we'll obviously do the evaluation, we'll pull a settlement from the bank to see exactly how much you still owe the bank, and then we basically do the maths. We've got a very clever computer system that does the maths, that subtract basically what we're giving for the car from the settlement. Whatever's left, again, can either be paid out to you in cash or you can put it towards the deal as a trade-in deposit. Now, sometimes it does happen that people want to trade in their vehicles a little bit early. They still owe a little bit more on the vehicle than what the vehicle is ultimately worth. Then we do have ways of working with that. Sometimes we'll ask you to pay in a little bit extra on the deposit. We'll try to see if we can't work it into the deal by terms of a trading assist, but there are ways of doing that, so your trade-in is always welcome. That is probably one of the easiest things to understand and easiest processes to follow. It's quite simple. You tell us you're interested in doing a finance application. We then email you an application form, which you've got to fill in as completely as possible, because trust me, all the information on there is very important and can help you get a lower interest rate at the end of the day. You send us back the application form, you send us back a copy of your ID, copy of your South African driver's license, 3 months latest banking statements. It can be internet banking statements as long as they have the digital stamp on there, and then also your last 3 months pay slips and a proof of residence. Then you send that all to us, we submit it to our lovely ladies Nulene or Lorianne, and they then submit it to the bank, which then sends the answer back to us and we get back in touch with you. So at the end of that, if you have any questions for us regarding finance, please leave them in the comment section below and we'll get back to you with those answers. Have a good day, everybody.